And the bad news is Darren G is playing a dangerous game here with Danny Christie. A very, very dangerous game. Now, I'm going to go right back to the beginning. I wasn't actually good. I've already spoke about the podcast. I wasn't going to go into the whole back and forth between James English and Darren G. But this is now boiling over to the point where straighteners are getting called on and this, that and the other. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. Made a video about this part. James English and Darren G used to be mates, as you can see in the thumbnail. They do not like each other. There has been some politics behind the scenes. They made podcasts together. Darren, basically, long story short, thought that James was trying to set him up with a firm of gangsters that were basically after Darren because he is an ex-gangster himself. And James basically thinks that Darren's a mouthy, ungrateful arsehole, more or less. I think that's pretty much it. So they've been going back and forth for years and years and years. Darren's always said that James is in bed with this criminal entity who are after him because Darren's exposed them for crimes and dealing and stuff like that in the Liverpool area, and stands against them with the message, the old L5 alive, choose a life, not a knife, and all that. And James English has basically said that Darren's a paranoid lunatic who just won't leave him alone, keeps giving it about him online, and yada, yada, yada. So James English had Amy Palin, Amy G, Darren's brothers, who's sadly not with us anymore. He died from taking his own, sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but, I'm trying to think of the words to say, committing himself, doing bad stuff to himself, basically. And that was his ex-missus, not his wife, but his girlfriend, I think. They had 3 kids together. And she's come on saying that Darren did some bad stuff to her 12-year-old daughter, basically showing her inappropriate pictures of women. She was saying all sorts of crap about Darren was breaking into her house and going in her back garden. He would pay an addict to basically attack her. And this, honestly, it's like a 2-hour podcast and it's just an absolute hit piece. I believe very, very little of it. And I first thought that James English had sort of put her up to it because he does sort of target some of the questions and prods her into saying stuff at times. But apparently some news has been leaked that she was actually sectioned under the Mental Health Act because she was saying people were breaking into her garden and climbing on top of her shed and trying to break in her house, which is the same stuff that she was saying about Darren. So maybe she's just got bad mental health issues and English just took her on thinking she was telling the truth when she wasn't. There's a possibility. Then James English, basically, they're going back and forth. After this, James English calls Darren G out to a charity boxing match. James English comes off terrible from this podcast, by the way. Get absolute backlash in the comments. Everyone seems to be siding with Darren G on this one. James English calls Darren G out to a charity boxing match. He says, 250 grand, I will donate it to any charity of your choice, Darren, if you box me. I'll give you a date, I'll give you a time, there'll be no one there, just me, you and a cameraman, and we can box in the ring. And judging by footage that is out there, Darren couldn't punch his way out of a wet paper bag. I'll stand by that, I've said it from the beginning. And James looks like he has obviously trained a bit. He's training at MTK, which also set Darren's mind on fire because he's convinced that the people that run MTK Gym are all associated with this firm that are trying to get him. So he's obviously... At first, I thought Darren maybe saw a bit more what was going on, but when you start involving the other people and these people that I actually know and what he's actually saying about them, I can just see how crazy it actually and the conspiracy actually is. So anyway, James gave him a date, gave him a time. He didn't turn up. Darren said, if you donate 125k up front, then I'll turn up. Which is never going to happen. Never, ever in a million years going to happen. That's basically him saying, I'm not coming. You might as well just say, I'm not coming. Who in their right mind is going to do that? Considering he sent Sam Walker to Dublin and then just laughed and didn't turn up, which was quite funny at the time, but yeah. Anyway, in steps Danny Christie, and he goes on a tirade going ballistic at Darren G, because they've had back and forths previously in the past. Darren is convinced this is through Danny's association to the Furies, who they're associated to, a sort of criminal entity, James English, and the criminal entity that he's associated to, and they're all trying to get they're all trying to get Danny G. They're all trying to cancel him. I believe this not to be true. I don't see any truth in this whatsoever. I just think this is such paranoia. The reason why Danny Christie doesn't like him, he's never been one to hold his tongue. He's never been one to not speak his feelings. And there are videos of Darren G speaking quite inappropriately to young looking girls on TikTok. And apparently these have been there for years on lives. And that's obviously the reason why Danny doesn't like him. I think they had a slight back and forth that ended up escalating a few years back, and they just have held a grudge against each other since then. But Darren G is like a dog with a bone. Once he thinks someone's out to get him, he just keeps goading them, keeps poking them, keeps talking about them. These people, these are against me, yada, yada, yada. And the reason why Danny started going at him this time is because Darren mentioned his name in one of his videos talking about James English. So it set Danny off, and Danny's remembered and reshared the videos that were floating about in the past. And we all know that no one's beaten Danny in a verbal fisticuffs online. He's very, very sharp-tongued, very quick-witted, and very funny. And Darren now has absolutely lost the plot. Absolutely lost the plot. Doing videos saying he wants a straightener with Danny, he wants to meet him in Birmingham. He wants Danny to meet him in Birmingham. No fair play, man. No cameras, just them two to have a straightener, because he's got all these anger inside of all these people going at him for years. He's talking about Paul Venice, like him and Danny are involved together somehow, and Hedgehog Man. And he calls him Video Craig, obviously, because that was his old account. There's a few other people that he names, and it's just like, well, Hedgehog Man Video Craig is not in bed with James English. Neither that, or is he associated with any criminal entities. And we know that because he got into a bit of a run-in for saying bad stuff about a gangster from Newcastle before, where if he was involved in any criminal entities, they probably could have got him out of it, but they didn't. So he had to apologise. So that's no truth in that whatsoever. And he's talking about Paul sticking up for Danny and how they're basically in it together, and they're both trying to shut him down together and trying to cancel him. But the fact of the matter is, I haven't heard Paul or Danny talk about each other personally as spoke about each other for a long time. So, or do any content together or anything to that matter for a long time. So why does Paul making a slight video talking about the situation, being a YouTuber, doing what he gets paid ad revenue for, have anything to do with Danny when they barely talk about each other in it? And Danny's not mentioned Paul, and Paul's barely mentioned Danny, just spoke about the situation. So again, just a paranoid conspiracy theory, which is starting to cause cracks in all of the arguments that Darren G... I've got Danny's, Darren's, Dean's... I've got all sorts of D's bouncing around my head. It's causing cracks in the argument that Darren G had against all these people, firming up against him to take him down, which now is looking like absolute rubbish. It could be true, but I can definitely say I find it very, very, very hard to think that Danny, Paul or Hedgehog Man or anyone else to this matter have anything to do with the Amy Palin, James English and background criminal entities going on. That is all in Darren's head, and I would put my neck on the line and say I'll bet a lot of money on that. But Darren is saying he's got all this anger inside and he wants to let it out, and Danny shouldn't talk like he's a criminal or a gangster, because Darren is that and he's not, and this, that and the other, and he wants a straightener basically. So Danny Christie has never ever said he's a gangster. He actually was a criminal organisation, got into a bit of a ruckus with one of them a couple of years ago, and he came out and said he's not a gangster. He is a fighter. He doesn't want anything to do with organised criminal organisations. So Darren even saying that is just absolute bullshit. Darren's talking about, oh, you haven't damaged anyone with a weapon in your hand. That has nothing to do with the straightener. And if anything, that shows that you are less willing to have a straightener. I know that he's from a different environment to what I grew up in, and I didn't see that sort of thing. But someone who wants to go doing stuff like that, it surely means that there is no other means, or they're worried of dealing with it in other means. I don't know. Or for me, that just has no relevance to it whatsoever. If you are these roadman types, I find they consider themselves to be fighters, or like they've had fights, but hitting someone with a tool, or shooting someone, or having a big group rumble that lasts 30 seconds, or punching someone outside a nightclub, or having a prison scrap that lasts 20 seconds. This is not a fight. This does not make you good at fighting. You are not a fighter. So all this anger that Darren G has got inside him, that he wants to let out, and he wants to meet Danny for a straightener, this is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Danny Christie is a professional bare knuckle fighter. He's one of the best bare knuckle fighters the UK has ever produced, statistically, on paper. Titles, world title challenges, and everything in between. And he's a fighting machine, isn't he? Let's have it right. He's obviously ended his BKFC career due to cuts, damage and stuff, and having reached the heights, and at the age of 41, there's nothing left for him to achieve in it. But what he would do to Darren G, who's had no training ever, and the videos that are floating about of him being in the boxing gym and that are just appalling. What Danny Christie would do to him in a street fight. And I know Darren probably thinks, yeah, I'm really angry. Oh, I had a fight once when I was in prison 20 years ago. It's like, mate, I would back Danny Christie with both arms tied behind his back and a blindfold on. It's going to be a very, very, very bad day for Darren G in this fight call out. If Danny takes it up, which more than likely he will, because Darren started bringing his misses into it and stuff like that, and started being really, really personal. It's just going to end in Darren G getting his face smashed in, and all this anger that he's got inside of him is just going to get worse, because I'm sure going and losing a fight isn't going to make you feel better about the situation, is it? Going to get beaten up by one of the people that you're convinced, probably not happening, but you're convinced has been plotting against you for years, then going to meet him for a straightener and getting your face punched in by him is not going to prove a lot, is it? And it's not going to make your anger any less. But that's the situation, boys. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Who do you think could win? Do you think it would be Danny, or do you think it would be Darren? Adios. Thanks for watching. Le Bosch.